All right, Stephen, let's talk some Baltimore Ravens. This is a team that has been incredibly unfortunate from the injury standpoint the last couple of seasons. I mean, have been losing guys in preseason, losing guys in training camp, losing guys all over the place. And so it's kind of hard to truly assess this team over the last couple of seasons because, listen, they've kind of gone in really and truly without any sort of semblance of what they thought they were going to be going into as the season got going. So I've kind of given them a break and really just tried to evaluate them as what I think this team is on paper here. Of course, John Harbaugh coming in as head coach, longtime head coach for this squad, one of the better head coaches in all the NFL by pretty much every metric that's out there. Greg Roman, offensive coordinator, Mike McDonald, defensive coordinator. And, if we look at what they did in the offseason, who they brought in and who went out, it's a little bit unbalanced, but I still think that this team's roster is pretty solid. They brought in Marcus Williams at safety. They brought in Michael Pierce, a defensive lineman. They brought in right tackle Morgan Moses for a big signing, and they bring in corner Kyle Fuller. Now, headed out of town, they traded Hollywood Brown to the Cardinals. Brandon Williams, Anthony Averett, Derek Wolfe, Bradley Bozeman, Jimmy Smith, Sammy Watkins, Tavon Young, Chris Board. All those guys are out of town here for this Ravens squad, all of those guys played at least 50% of the snaps as well for this team last year. So it is a bunch of guys on the move. I do like their pickups in Marcus Williams, Michael Pierce, Morgan Moses, Kyle Fuller. I think those are all solid signings for them. And again, if they can just stay healthy, at least the starters on this team from a roster standpoint are pretty solid.
My opinion on this Ravens team going into the season is that they are a playoff team because of everything you just mentioned. But I reject the notion of what the market currently has them as right now as the favorite to win this division at anywhere between plus 155 to plus 165. And the Cincinnati Bengals still available at some books as we record this at 2-1. I can't get there for that. And we'll discuss the reasons why I am bullish on the Bengals despite playing a tougher schedule here in a moment. But so that's kind of where I'm at. I think this is a wild card team. I think this is a team that was 8-3 on December 1st last year before they had one too many injuries, including Lamar Jackson. But at the same time, 8 of those wins in their first 11 games were fourth quarter comebacks. So how sustainable is that? You could look at it one of two ways. You could look at it as they were elite when Lamar Jackson was on the field, or you can look at it as it might not be sustainable. So I do think that what we saw with the Ravens offense last year is absolutely not what they want to be. In 2019 and 2020, this was a team that was top 2 in the league in run rate. And in 2021, the Ravens were the 7th most pass-heavy team in the NFL, up from 30th in 2020. And what have they done this offseason? They traded Marquise Brown. They didn't add a single wide receiver in the draft or free agency. I wonder what they're going to want to do this year. They're going to get back to the run. They want to be run-heavy. So they got Ronnie Staley back, their left tackle from injury, who they lost earlier in the season. And really, the only true high pedigree receiver they have is Rashad Bateman because they've pretty much struck out at the wide receiver position in the last 3 years in the draft, and they're banking on their most recent first-round pick, Bateman, to pick up the pieces there. So I do think this is a run-heavy team, but I can't get there to making them the favorite in this division because there are too many concerns with their passing offense, and in particular, Lamar Jackson as a passer, if you look at his advanced stats.
Yeah, it is certainly an interesting way that they went about it in the offseason. I mean, I'm looking here. I took a piece of J.K. Dobbins way a long time ago for Offensive Player of the Year. That doesn't look like he's going to pan out. We don't even know for sure if he's going to be out there week 1. For the same reasons you did, because when they went the way that they went in the draft, and I'll get to that right now, actually. So first round, they had 2 first-round picks. They took safety Kyle Hamilton with a first-round pick, and then they took center Tyler Linderbaum. with a first-round pick. They come back in the second round. They take David Ajabo at linebacker, who's a great player. Don't get me wrong. It was just a lot of people were going screaming, hey, you need a wide receiver, you need a wide receiver. They get a really good linebacker in the second round in David Ajabo, but still wasn't a wide receiver. Third round, did they take one there? No. Defensive tackle, Travis Jones in the third round. Fourth round, offensive tackle, Daniel Falali. So you're looking here, another fourth-round pick, a corner in Jalen Armour Davis, another fourth-round pick, and they take a tight end in Charlie Kohler, another fourth-round pick, Isaiah Likely, and then a cornerback in the fourth. This was a record for a team to have 6 fourth-round picks like the Ravens did, and they still didn't even take a flyer on a wide receiver. You know, I mean, they had 6 picks in the fourth round. They still didn't even take a flyer on a wideout. So whenever you look at what this lineup is going to look like, this is why a lot of people, I think, are a little bit down on this squad. And you know, look, me included, even though I think that they're fine from a roster standpoint overall, you are asking a lot of Rashad Bateman and Devin Duvernay and Prochet and to step up. I mean, listen, Mark Andrews at this point,
that's their number one wide receiver, right?
With the age of Kelsey and the age of some of these other tight ends that have been studs or something, who knows? Mark Andrews might be the best tight end in the game right now. But that's your number one receiver. It's a tight end, and that is what bothers me, Stephen. It's the same thing we used to talk about last year on the podcast with this team, and that was what happens when they get down. Yes, as a front runner, this team should be a world beater, right? I mean, the way that they go about things, they should be absolute world beaters. They've got the 11th easiest schedule in all the NFL. They've got a good offensive line. They've got a great secondary. I mean, like, other teams, you know, shouldn't be able, if they are able to get ahead of squads, other teams shouldn't be able to come back on them very easily. When you're talking about Marcus Peters, Marlon Humphrey, Kyle Fuller, Marcus Williams, and then they drafted Kyle Hamilton. I mean, that is a solid secondary. So there are some really positives to this squad as well. But my worry is when they get down in games, can't teams just double cover Mark Andrews and then it's like beat us with Rashad Bateman or Devin Duvernay, and I just don't know if that's going to be able to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I see why the market is betting the Ravens. I just can't get there with the logic. It's, you know, we hate strength of schedule as a metric overall because the mainstream sports media uses it by looking at previous year's record, which is ridiculous. But Sharp Football does a good job of giving us strength of schedule based on opponent win totals this year. So what the market is telling us that what it's going to be. And the Ravens have the 11th easiest by that measure, and the Bengals have the 6th toughest. And combine that with the Ravens being healthy this year, that helps too. But the passing game here with Lamar Jackson was a major concern last year. Lamar was 27th in expected completion percentage and 17th in completion percentage over expectation. He was a below average EPA passer. And even when he was not pressured, he was 25th and also 28th in EPA on first downs. So 15.2% of his passes were incomplete due to inaccuracy. So his fault. And that ranked bottom 5 among quarterbacks last year. So the concerns for the pass game are still there. So why might the market be installing the Ravens as a favorite to win this division? I do think it's the schedule. If you look at the teams that they're playing on their schedule, it flips from last year. They have a lot of inexperienced quarterbacks that they're facing. Kenny Pickett, Zach Wilson, Mac Jones, Trevor Lawrence, Daniel Jones, Tua, maybe Jacoby Brissett twice, Sam Darnold or Baker Mayfield, and Marcus Mariota. And you can maybe throw Jameis Winston into that mix as an easy quarterback. I wouldn't, but perhaps you would. So the schedule of opposing quarterbacks for this defense to feast on is there. And if the running game is better, this offense should do enough, because when Lamar was on the field from week 1 to 13 last year, we mentioned the passing issues, but overall as an offense, they were 7th in the league in success rate and 5th and 6th in rush EPA and success rate. So to your point, they only had a halftime lead in 8 of the 17 games because their defense was just decimated. They were getting rolled on last year. So all that being said, the only bet I like for the Baltimore Ravens this year is Lamar Jackson over 849.5 rushing yards. This is off market compared to a couple of other books. You can use our prop finder at thelines.com to figure out which book it's at. In his last 2 healthy seasons, he went over 1,000 yards. In fact, at 1,200 in his MVP year. If you look at his career rushing yards per game average, he can miss 3 games and still hit this over. And last year, he was 100 yards shy of hitting this over when he only played in 12 games. So I think this number is short on Lamar Jackson rushing yards. And every indication the Ravens have given us this offseason is that they're going to get back to the run. I just don't think they should be the favorite to win the division.
Yeah, I guess the only narrative-based thing here would be, and I'm not saying that this is something that is necessarily actionable, but it is something to at least bring up, right, is will there be any hesitancy to run the ball should he not have that new contract yet, right? Because we saw Deebo Samuel be like, hey, I ain't being a running back if you aren't going to pay me. Like, that ain't going to happen, right? And then he gets paid and actually ends up getting a bonus in his contract.
It's the coaches. Here's my thing, though, Matt. It's the coaches' asses if they don't call the plays that give them the best chance to win. And it's not like Lamar Jackson is up there audibling out of a bunch of run plays either. So Lamar Jackson is his own agent, so it's on him to get to the negotiating table and get his money. It would be the smart thing to do, but I don't think it's going to change necessarily how they call the offense if he doesn't have his contract.
The best number you can find on them to win the Super Bowl is 22-1 out there. If you are interested in that, be sure and shop around. And plus 165, the best number you can find for the Ravens to win the AFC North.